I'm going to go ahead and record to the computer because it said that it couldn't record to the cloud. Not sure. All right, so tonight we are going to, I'm very excited for our speaker tonight, but I did want to, before she gets introduced, I wanted to welcome you all to our TEL meeting and welcome, everyone that is here, and thank you for the faculty that have joined us. I'm very grateful that you're here. And so what I'd like to do, and hope Dr. Ryle, hopefully this is all right. I just want to say a real quick prayer, and then I'll hand it off to you for, you said you had a few minutes or had somebody to speak for a few minutes. And then I'll turn it over to Katie, who will introduce our speaker. Sound good?
Perfect.
All right. And I would just like to say, at this time in the semester, I know we're all stressed, a lot of things going on. So please know, I'm going to say a prayer for our evening, but please know that if you have told me or expressed to me any kind of prayer request, that I am definitely praying for you. I know that this time of the semester can be a little bit, a lot. So please know that I'm praying for you. I can guarantee you that the other faculty that are here on the screen and those who are not are also praying for you. Okay, so let's just take a moment to go to the Lord in prayer. Dear Jesus, thank you for this day. Thank you that even though the seasons change and it becomes kind of cold and wet, that we can still praise you and still know that that you're with us. And sometimes the changing seasons are good for us. And please be with us tonight as we listen to our wonderful speaker. Let's have our eyes open and our ears open for what you have to say for us through our speaker tonight about diversity and teaching, and be with all of us as we are going through our days here towards the end of the semester. Help everybody to have calm hearts and be able to finish strong. In your name I pray. Amen. Okay, I'll hand it over to Dr. Ryle.
Thank you, Dr. Rhodes. The last couple of days, you've gotten an email or two about a young lady, Jenny Zwecker, who's been on the Asbury campus for the last couple of days. She is a recruiter for an organization that places teachers overseas, not student teachers, but regular teachers. So she's looking to employ teachers. One of the attendees tonight is Lydia Ripley, and I would encourage you to join me in praying for Lydia as she leaves for Thailand to do her student teaching in late December. So Lydia, we will be praying for you. Another person on the screen there is Jenna Davis. Jenna and I have also had conversations about her student teaching overseas, which is one of the unique opportunities that you have as an Asbury education major. And so I knew there would be at least a couple of you, and ideally even more of you that are interested in that possibility. So I'm going to have Jenny share with you for a couple minutes about what those options are. If Dr. Rhodes will stop sharing the screen, I think that will help people be able to see her.
Sure. There we go.
Okay, here we go. Jenny Zwecker.
Hi, I'm Jenny. I work with International Schools Consortium, and we operate 6 international schools in China and 1 in the United Arab Emirates. And then we have an online academy as well. So we are looking for pre-K to 12th grade, American curriculum, certified teachers who have a heart for education, but also a desire to go overseas. Because of the countries that we serve in, you can't be a missionary to China or a missionary to the UAE, but you can be a teacher who loves Jesus and uses that platform as well. So the teachers that we hire from overseas are believers, but we avoid that word missionary because it's illegal in those countries, but we are missions minded. So we call it hiding in plain sight. People know we're believers, but it's just cool to see how the Lord uses that. So I taught in the UAE for 4 years with ISC, and now I recruit full time. So if you'd like to talk more, I'd love to connect with you. And my information is in that email. So thank you so much.
And now we'll throw the ball to Katie Simon, and she'll introduce our speaker. Katie.
Hey guys, so yeah, I'm Katie Simon, and I'm really excited tonight because I get to introduce to you Ashley Gates. She's been in the field of education for 7 years, all within the alternative and residential setting. Her degree is in psychology with a minor in Black Studies, and she pursued her MAT program to become a special education teacher. So most recently, she received her rank 1 in education specialist, which she plans to continue using with behavior and cultural responsive efforts. Currently, she functions as the high school team's behavior coach at the Providence School, where she works to create differentiated behavior plans and interventions for both their general and special education populations. Prior to the school year, she served as the Jessamine County Schools cultural responsive teaching and learning representative. Her passion and purpose is to empower people and support them on their journey with equity and cultural responsiveness, and not just their educational environments, but their world. And we're just really excited to hear from her and learn from her. So if you guys will turn your attention to her now, that would be awesome.
I will say, I don't think I've ever had an introduction quite like that before. And I do work with high school kids who hype me up on a regular basis. Like, they are my hype men and women. So I appreciate the excitement. I'm excited to have this opportunity. This is truly a blessing. The last couple of years, I've been able to speak with people, collaborate with people, like-minded educators and also unlike-minded educators, and kind of just bridge a gap that exists and has existed for so long. But I'm just kind of here to spark conversation. I do have just a brief, I'm a Google person, but I love Canva. And so Google and Canva do not like each other right now. So I tried to just, let me just take this one presentation. I'm going to tidy it up and make it all pretty. And Canva doesn't like that. So you have a hybrid presentation for me tonight. But I really hope I don't really need it, because I just love having authentic conversations and kind of seeing where everybody's at. And sharing my story and the work that I do, because fortunately for myself and my kids, we serve one of the most underserved population of students at our school. The Providence School is the top alternative school in the district, or not even in the district, in the state. But some of our kids, they have helped kind of flourish my passion with this, and they would be so embarrassed me talking about them, but that's going to be a lot of what I share with you all tonight, is my experiences with them, in addition to some background stuff. So do I have access to share my screen now?
You should.
Okay.
And one of our Asbury grads is there, Patrick Simpson.
Oh, he's my SPED mentor. Oh my goodness. Sorry. I love it. We actually just finished a BIP today for a student, and he was so nervous. I'm going to hype him up though. He was super nervous because he was like, well, you just act like you speak the language all the time. And I'm like, man, by the end of your time here, I promise you'll speak our language too. So I love Patrick. He's amazing.
Oh, he's just great.
Yeah.
So I just had to brag.
Oh no, you're good. I'm gonna tell him that you bragged, because he is truly a blessing for our students this year. Let's see here. I think maybe on my end, I don't think I prepared for this. So can I share with you the presentation link and just have you cast it?
Absolutely.
I am so sorry. Let's see here. Anybody with the link?
You can even put it in the chat if you would like to.
Yes, I am not. It is very simplistic. Let's see here. I promise I'm also my tech coach at our school, so I'm typically not this slow with technology. I apologize.
I was struggling earlier because Zoom was not wanting to do what it wanted. Okay, I'll go ahead and share that.
Oh, yes, I apologize. Let's see.
Here we go. It says you are.
Yeah, so hit edit, and then you can just present from the first. Oh, sorry. See, now I'm making you be extra techie. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll continue with Google. I have an account, so. I have it through my Gmail, so in case you're wondering who that random person is.
Awesome, that is perfect.
Right, do you want me to go ahead and make it bigger?
Yes, please. Thank you, thank you. You can stare at a very large Bitmoji version of myself, because I am already in mom mode. I have a 7-month-old who is screaming upstairs with her father right now. So if you hear little screams, I apologize. So like my fantastic introduction said, I'm Ashley Gates. I am a 7th-year educator at the Providence School. I grew up wanting to change the world, but I didn't know how that was going to look. Like I didn't want to be a president, or my dad thought I would be a really good lawyer for reasons, because I don't like to argue. I just like to state facts. And then I fell in love with softball and played college softball for a while, and then decided to pursue sports psychology, but then quickly realized that school is hard and school is very hard for me. So I went a different route and kind of took coaching for about a decade, and then jumped into teaching kind of after being pushed in by some parents who were like, hey, I think you would be a really good teacher. And I was like, you've heard me coach, and it's not that I'm not the nicest, but at times I'm very direct. So I fell in love with teaching. My first year was at a residential facility in Wolfe County. So I am very familiar with Eastern Kentucky all too well, and still have friends and contacts out there. But I served Buckhorn Children Family Services. They had a school, Desi Scott, was for students on the spectrum as well as behavior disorders. And then now I believe they're just spectrum students, students served. But that was kind of my introduction to difficult populations. And so that's kind of where the passion and purpose came for kind of trying to reach those types of students and staff who seem to be kind of unreachable, right? And all too often the stigma kind of overshadows that. And so being at Providence is the biggest blessing, because I get to share my story and I get to hear my kids' stories and the people I work with. And it's just, it's truly, I am so fortunate to be in the position that I am. So how I came here is Andy McNeil is one of the best principals you could ever help ask for, hope for, and she and I have worked very diligently with their school over the last 2 to 3 years around culture responsive teaching and learning for their student population. So again, I'm just super blessed to be here to kind of spark some conversation. As cheesy as it is, a night of conversations, connections, and collaboration. The 3 C's. I do a lot of things in threes. My kids say that's like my mark, like, if Gates is going to tell you 1 time, she's going to tell you 2 and 3 times. So I stay consistent at least. So just kind of an easy way of opening up and kind of making sure that we're all comfortable. Because the first step in meeting people where they're at is making sure everybody's comfortable. So I like to do what's called a temperature check. With my kids, I call it a temp check. And it's just kind of like a, where are you at? And so periodically, sometimes when, not sometimes, periodically, I really do have like moments where sometimes the stuff we're talking about gets a little difficult. I hope that's not the case tonight. I hope it's uncomfortable, but not difficult in like an alarming way. I promise I'm here to hold your hand, although not physically, more technologically through the screen. But if at any point you feel just a little kind of, ooh, I might need to just take a second, I encourage you to. Anytime I'm having conversations with my kids, with my coworkers, with my bosses, it's always what I find best practice is to make sure that if my heart's kind of racing a little bit, or if I'm feeling kind of oof, somebody else is probably feeling the same way. And so just being aware of that. So if at any point tonight you're kind of like, ooh, like I like what she's saying, but it's just a kind of hitting a nerve, it's okay to just take a second, take a deep breath, refocus. I'm sure you'll see me doing that a lot tonight as I listen to my child crying upstairs. But I'm just here to kind of help support you all however you need that. So if you don't mind, go ahead and hit into the next slide for me. All right, so like I said, Google and Canva, they are not very cohesive. So you are getting, I promise, a very colorful presentation, but some of my details aren't on the screen, which works for you because then you have to listen to me talk. I apologize. But I will, if there's stuff that I'm like, hey, if you're a note taker like I am, I might be like, this is kind of something to just keep in your think box. So the trifecta of understanding is what I always open up with. And these are those 3 main pieces that we don't even realize we need in having conversations with people who are like us and people who are different from us. And I have done extensive research. Anybody familiar with Zaretta Hammond, Culture Responsive Teaching in the Brain? I'm seeing some head nods. Awesome. It's a very intense and very in-depth book, but she talks a lot about how our brain works, especially around things like implicit bias, fight or flight, our amygdala hijack, and all of those things are components that we kind of immerse ourselves in at my school through our foundations that we teach our kids. So first and foremost, our identity. Our identity is where we come from. It's who we are. It's at the core of our existence. And I think at times we forget that as educators, we have all of these other layers. Like, I'm so quick to say that I'm a Black biracial educator. And then people are like, why you guys say educator? Like, why is that so important for you? For me, educator encompasses such a huge part of who I am. But that's not just what I am, right? Or I just became a new mom. I'm not just a new mom. So our identities kind of help shape and navigate how we interact with different people, how we interact with the same people in our groups, with our families, with our common communities. It's at the basis of all levels in my, how do I put this? We'll call it in my expertise. I'm not really an expert on this. I just love it. So then if we know our identity, if we know where we're coming from, then we get to kind of talk about that perspective. We get to shift that. And that's kind of what navigates us, your compass, so to speak. Your perspective is what's going to help shape how you see things, quite literally. I have a couple slides after this, but that kind of hit on that, but I wanted to kind of hit with this first and kind of dive deeper into the first two, or what we are going to talk about tonight. And the implicit bias aspect, we may not make it to, which is totally great, because sometimes that can be a little heavy, just because we get into, you guys heard of like single story narratives, microaggressions, different things like that. Implicit bias encompasses all of that. And sometimes it can be a little too much for an hour. So I don't know if we'll tap on that, but if you don't mind hitting the next slide for me. I hope you all have seen a picture of a culture tree at some point in your life, even if you didn't know that it was a culture tree. And as you know, we've all seen the iceberg, like the old school iceberg. You know, you don't really know like what's under the iceberg until you get too close. I'm not saying the iceberg is not great, but I just get, you know, a little bit of PTSD with some Titanic action, and it just kind of puts me in a weird space. So I like the culture tree personally. And so it's really great, this visual, because it asks us, which level do we target on a regular basis? Okay. 100% of human beings target surface culture almost immediately, because it's the easiest thing that we can see, right? It's the leaves on the tree. It's your language, it's the food you eat, it's your little quirks and your habits. Maybe it's the way you dance, maybe it's the types of dance that come from cultures. So that surface level typically has little, not no emotion, no impact on emotion, but little to no impact on that emotional trust, because it's just so natural. Like if I see a kid walking down the street with, I'm going to use a kid that we welcome our students with music every morning. And so 99% of the time you get a gauge off of whether the kid is in a good mood, bad mood, kind of that temperature check. And so I find out that Funky Fridays, apparently my kids don't really like Michael Jackson, which it is what it is. I'll get over it eventually, but you can always have a temperature check by reading facial expressions, right? Like that's something that we may not necessarily realize we do, because it's a form of nonverbal communication, but that surface level is almost the easiest way into any conversation or any interaction with someone. But a lot of the times that next level, that shallow culture, is kind of the wall that we hit. I know with our student population, it's tough sometimes to get them to allow us to hit that shallow culture. But it's kind of where, like, in some countries, it's super inappropriate to make eye contact, right? Or you shouldn't touch hands, interact. I'm an Army brat, so I grew up overseas in Germany. And the first 7 years of my life were a lot of like, this is why we don't do that, or this is why we can't do that, even though we were on an American military base. But those are those shallow cultural pieces that, unless you are aware of the culture that you're around, whether it be your school culture, your familial culture, anything, any identity piece, it's, unless you know it, you don't know it. Like, I always use this example. My kids say that I'm old. There's this video of former President Obama dapping up NBA players, and then he shakes the hands of the non-Black players. And my kids are like, you can't use that. That's not appropriate. But it's an example of shallow culture. There's a certain way, right, that people interact based on a commonality. Now, I teach my students that no matter who you are, you do a firm handshake, whether you're female or male. And then if you're cool with them after that, maybe you can offer a dap. But that's that cultural piece, right? That shallow piece. And I tell you what, the generation today is reshaping a lot of those shallow norms. So then we get down to the deep culture. And this is the part that makes people really uncomfortable and like kind of start to sweat a little bit. And that's those norms, those beliefs, your religious views, right? Definitions of what family is supposed to look like. Individualism, collectivism. I always say like that worldview perspective, right? So even though culture tree is what shapes our identity, it's also what allows us, you'll see a trend here, well, it allows us to then open up our eyes to see different perspectives. We don't have to be experts on all three of these levels with every single human we interact with, but the more authentic you are with things and the more authentic that we are in just acknowledging and wanting to know more, that awareness really does help kind of shape and navigate those different pieces. So before I hit to the next piece, I like interactive sessions. I don't know if any of you were expecting an interactive session. So I love feedback and I love asking questions. So if you don't mind in the chat box, I can't say this is for class credit. This is just more for me to kind of get a temperature check. Is anybody willing to share some examples of their surface culture, like different things that you are aware of within yourself, within your school culture, within your work culture, familial? You can just type it in the box. Anything that's just very evident or something that you're very aware of on the surface level. You don't have to share, by the way. This isn't one of those like tests. Like, for example, when I walk into my school building, the first surface culture piece that I usually notice are people's eyes. And a lot of that is because of COVID, because we couldn't see faces for so long. So the first thing I look at people is eyes. And I tell you what, we've had a lot of sick folks at work this week that have gone home within the first couple hours. I'm like, you know, those eyes that I saw this morning, like they didn't look like, you know, they're 110%. So think about examples like that. What is the first thing that you are most aware of with someone's surface level? Maybe that's a better way of explaining it. There's no judging here, by the way. Like, I know that's also like of course people judge. No, like this is judgment-free zone. This is just kind of us connecting, that collaborating piece. Because otherwise, like I said, you gotta listen to me talk for another 30 minutes. Eyes.
Everybody else can too.
I might notice how someone is dressed. Good, yeah. Ooh, person accent, posture. This might be a generational thing, getting the door. Ooh, that is a good one. And I actually, even at my school, I have people that are offended when I like do the awkward wait, right? Like if I let go, then it's going to close right before him. But if I stay too long, it's that awkward kind of come and go. I think language for me, accents. Ooh, tattoos. Very cool. And so again, like this just means that we're aware of things, right? Like noticing surface level on people is not, you know, you hear the old saying, never judge a book by its cover. Well, you don't judge, right, off of the surface level. It's just you formulate kind of your single story or your carry emotions and feelings, their smile or lack of posture. I tell you what, y'all are going to be pretty upset because I'm telling you, these high school kids, they do not have good posture. They do not. And they don't even wear backpacks anymore. Like, you might be able to see how a student is feeling based on their posture or their pace. Good, good. All right. Okay, I'll dial it back a little bit. So, Michael, the reason I ask this is because sometimes we as educators are way more aware of a lot of things going on than we give ourselves credit for, right? Like, we do a great job day in and day out. It's tough, whether you're in school studying to be an educator or whether you're in the classroom being an educator, all right? Like, education is so hard right now. because there's so many different hats that we have to wear, even more so than we did before. And so that social emotional learning piece that's been coming out a lot around mental health awareness, to me, that's cultural responsiveness, right? Like you're checking in on the social emotional well-being of an individual, which hits surface, shallow, and deep-rooted culture all in one. Because 9 times out of 10, what we're seeing is that a lot of what's happened in the last 3 years has embedded into this generation and our own generation, right? So like we as a human race right now have kind of lost sight of a lot, right? I think we can all agree on that. And so sometimes hitting that reset button and working on ourselves, having that self-awareness and that self-care, like if we're not okay, we can't expect to give 110% of our best selves to our kids, right? Or to our coworkers. And so that shallow culture and that deep culture right now, like we got to repair it. And that's the number one concern of educators in my building and in the district that I serve, is how do we reach those kids at the shallow and deep culture levels, okay, when they are so broken right now, their roots don't even really connect. And that's the only way I can describe it with imagery, is we're not connected, right? And so being culture responsive or being inclusive and having that equitable mindset. I come from a special ed background, so I'm all about differentiation. I love modifications, accommodations, but I make my kids work for it. And I know that's kind of like, wait, like you have to give them, my kids know that I expect the world of them, because if I have high expectations of myself, that translates from my shallow and deep culture into how I give myself to my kids, how I show up for my coworkers every day, how I navigate hard conversations and easy conversations with my bosses. So really, like, this culture tree is what shapes every interaction that we have, and just kind of giving it a face, showing the visualization, I just kind of hoped would allow you all to kind of see just, like, it's kind of an interesting way of looking at it. If you don't mind going to the next slide for me. So then we get into this perspective lens. So the viewpoint in which you see the world. The best part about this is everybody on here, everybody in the world has a different perspective lens. We all have a different vision. And I think that's the beauty in it, right? The beauty in differences. And so even if we agree on everything, our perspective is going to be completely different. I come from a military background. My dad is Black, my mom is white, and that affected my upbringing. It didn't impact it in a terrifyingly horrible way, but I was definitely exposed to a lot more diversity than, say, my partner who's from Somerset, Kentucky. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's interesting that, like, we've almost got to the point now where we have to label everything. I will admit that I am a compartmentalizer, but our perspective lenses can't be labeled. Like, it can't be, oh, that's the Asian way of looking at it. That's the Black way of looking at it. That's the, I call it the bougie. That's the bougie way of looking at it. That's the budget way of looking at it. We can't put labels on our perspectives, because once you start doing that, it completely undermines anything and everything that person is either trying to explain to you, trying to show you, or trying to connect with you on. And so that perspective lens is kind of not only how you see the world, but how you allow the world to see you. Because that perspective lens you're giving out, it's not just, man, I got my Ray-Bans on today, and then tomorrow I'm going to have a little bit of this, and I'm going to change it up. You can't, your perspective is always growing and evolving, but not one person will have the exact same perspective as you. And that's where I love the hard conversations. So I like to use an example of one of my more challenging moments in education is actually with one of my very near and dear best friends, who is one of my coworkers. His name is Robbie Ergang, and he would be so happy that I just name dropped him in one of these sessions, because anytime I go and talk somewhere, he's like, you got to mention me. And I always lie to him and tell him I don't. So Robbie Ergang is one of the most difficult parts of my story, one of the most traumatic experiences that I've ever had. But like I said, he's one of my best friends. And so our perspective lenses clashed his first year teaching with me. And I didn't think we were going to get past it. I didn't think that I would be able to teach in the same building as him. I didn't think I could handle myself professionally, because my implicit bias, or my implicit bias kicked in, and my perspective was immediately, it was like, y'all know those, and please forgive me, the transition lenses. You guys know what I'm talking about? It was like he and I hit a switch and we were able to kind of hit that transition lens, but it took a lot of work. And so I would like to share that story because it's interesting. It's interesting to see how something so painful can also bring people together, and not in an ineffective way. If you ask our students, we are two of the most dangerous folks at our school, but for very different reasons. Mr. Ergang is what we call the redirect king, and I am our behavior manager, or chaos coordinator, if you will. So my first year teaching with him, he showed up second semester, 3 weeks late into the semester because he was on a honeymoon, but had just been hired. And for me, that initial perspective was, okay, like, all right. So if you get married and have a honeymoon, you don't have to show up for work for 3 weeks. All right, I got it. Okay, check, got it. Not only that, but come to find out after meeting him for the first time, he was a Jessamine County Proud Boy. He's a West High grad, and was on the football team. Every stereotype you could possibly imagine, he embodied. The jock, the football player. He even has the smile that like you want to hate him so bad. Like it's that like, oh gosh, not quite Varsity Blues level. And so he just had this way about him that my perspective was, we're not going to like each other. And so after he showed up for work for the first day, he kind of came at me with like the dap, you know, like the up top, like, what's up? And I was like, no, like, I don't know you like that. Like, I'll shake your hand. My name's Ashley Gates, you know, and I was a science teacher at that point. So I was like, I'm around the corner from you. If you need anything, don't call me. That was before I became a little bit more approachable, we'll say. And so I spent from February until middle of May, literally trying everything I could do to get this guy to quit. And for me, and I promise I'll tell you why, but for me, every single day I saw him was just like a constant reminder of just something in the back of my mind I just didn't trust. I didn't like him. I didn't understand why people thought he was best for our kids. It's like, man, like you see, like we all have a story, like all of our kids can relate to us. How do you relate to a guy who is a wonder boy? I still call him Wonder Boy. So finally, I decided to be petty at graduation. And what Providence doesn't tell you when you start working there is that every new teacher has to sing at graduation, except you don't really, it's just like an initiation joke. And I was one of the only people to fall for it. So I got stuck singing at graduation. Well, so did Robbie Ergang. And what you would think, you know, just, oh, you all sang together and, you know, it was harmonious. No, not quite. I'm a little devious. And so I picked a song I didn't think he knew. I grew up with Marvin Gaye. So I said, Ain't No Mountain High Enough seemed like a song that, man, surely this dude could not compete with this. And he did compete with it. And for me, it was finally stopped being about everything I could do to try and make him not want to be around me and not want to be at our job. But I finally opened my eyes and was like, why do I not like him so much? Like, what about him causes me so much disdain and so much displeasure that like, I can't even stomach being around him. And it's because for me, my implicit bias or my perspective of a white affluent male from Jessamine County who went to West High and was on the football team and could show up to work 3 weeks late and still have a job. This was my single story perspective of him based on something else that I had gone through, based on a previous something that had happened to me. And it was in that moment I either had to pursue this terrible vengeance, which was not healthy for anybody, or finally drop the rope and hear who he was. So I finally got past that surface level and ended up, we went pretty quick for the deep-rooted culture because for him, I looked like someone who was a trustworthy person because his babysitter and any older woman that he was with when he was a child was a light-skinned woman. And so to him, I was, oh my gosh, like, yeah, like I know you, like, oh, let's be friends. And we both had to kind of have a temperature check, meet where we were at and figure out, okay, why is there so much friction here? And it was incredible and amazing. And we use that conversation and that experience with our students when they come to school as like, you don't have to like everything we do, but you have to respect us and what we're doing. You have to respect the differences, right? That's all being culture responsive is. That's what inclusivity is. It's just being respectful of any situation, any customs, conversations, wording, language, how people look, the way they talk. It's all about being respectful. And I promise it really is that simple. Because when you look at it, that simplicity, that single story perspective, great things can happen. And all too often, it's like we get kind of caught up in where we're at. Like we're just so stuck in where we're at. Like, oh, I have all these feelings. Like, I don't like this because of that. And I have this history with that, therefore. But sometimes we just got to drop the rope and just really be willing to be vulnerable ourselves, because we can't expect anybody else to meet us where we're at or to be authentic with us, to want to connect with us, communicate, collaborate. None of those things can happen if we're not truly willing to be vulnerable, drop the rope, and be aware of that. So that perspective lens is super powerful. And it really is not only how you see it, but it's how you shape everything you do, your identity, your perspective. I said it, we wouldn't really get to implicit bias because that does go down a road of a lot of really good, but can kind of get a little muddling when we're talking about perspective and identity as two separate entities. So here is where I ask another question to make you feel super uncomfortable and, oh gosh, why is this lady still asking me to type things? Has there ever been a time, and you don't even have to type, you can unmute yourself and say something if you'd like. Has there ever been a time where you knew you had to drop the rope, but you didn't necessarily agree with the other person for whatever reason, and so you just kept at it, but finally you dropped the rope? Have you ever had a time where you finally dropped the rope after you just feel like you couldn't do it? And then tell me about it. And yes, I'm staring at all of your facial expressions right now. Some of y'all got really good lighting in your places, by the way. Like, I am very impressed. I had to create my own lighting over here. I'm a space filler, by the way. Like, if nobody wants to talk, then I just kind of keep like dialoguing. I do morning announcements at my school, and my kids are like, your commentary is the best, because it's like that awkward pause where you're waiting to see if someone, wants to take the plunge, or if we just keep moving along effortlessly. You wouldn't be the first person, but yes, you can. I guess my question, let me go a little bit more detailed. Have you ever felt like the way you see something prohibited you from being able to drop the rope? There we go. Let me see if that's better. And if you want to share, please share. And it doesn't even have to be like, it can be, the way that your dog was acting the other day, it was like, okay, I know he wanted to go outside, but it was 4 o'clock in the morning and it was cold. Like, it could be that simple. What do you mean by drop the rope? Ooh, thank you. Okay, I was waiting for someone to say that, because my friends don't even know what that means. So drop the rope is, think about when you are strong-willed, not stubborn, because I think stubborn can be kind of rude at times. Strong-willed, you are so strong-willed, and you are just, I'm going to keep pulling and pulling and pulling that rope, because even though the other person on the other side's pulling, I'm going to pull even harder. And guess what? We're just going to keep pulling apart, right? We're just pulling. Think about, you just keep going, two opposite forces, all right? We're never going to meet in the middle. So if you drop the rope, if you both decide like, you know what? I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to ease up. I'm going to drop the rope. Not so the other person falls backwards, mind you, but you meet back in the middle and you just drop it. That's what we call it at school. If we're going back and forth in a conversation with a kid who's ready to explode, who can't see us, like who just can't get in the mindset, we say, all right, we're going to drop the rope. We're going to take a time out. We're going to chill for a minute, and then we're going to be able to come back and regroup. Thank you for asking that question.
All right, Rhodes is about to drop the rope that she didn't drop the rope.
This family comes from a very wealthy family, and I come from a poor family, and both kind of started out trying very hard. Ooh, yes, honey. Thank you so much for being vulnerable. Yes, person in my graduating class 25 years ago who's very unkind, very unusual, It's tough, right? Like, don't get me wrong. I tell my mom I am the world's best grudge holder. I'm not proud of that, in a sense of like, yes, it's great, but it's so hard for me sometimes to like, I can drop the rope at work, I can drop the rope with my kids, but when it comes to my personal life, there are sometimes I can't do it.
Well, I've told my students this, that sometimes the people who do us wrong, they don't know this. They haven't held it for 25 years. It's us who hold that. And
Mhm.
then that person has then affected us. When a lot of times the person who does us wrong or what we think is wrong doesn't even know that they did that. And that's something that's always been a little bit difficult for me. Like, and I couldn't even talk to him.
And that's okay. And I think that's kind of where, so the work, the passion, the purpose here, like, I think sometimes we get a lot, like really wrapped up in, we have to do what's right all the time, but sometimes what is right, it's not that it's so hard, it's that we can't see, like, it doesn't make sense. Like, it just, I can't do it. And it's not because I won't or don't want to, it's because there's something that's just deep down, we just can't let go yet. And I know that some of y'all are probably like, yeah, but it's just that simple. Not for everybody, right? Like, I could talk to a stranger. I've never met a stranger in my life. My mom told me as a kid, she was a little worried because I would talk to everybody. I think that's how my daughter is going to be. So she's going to repay me back for all of that. But that comes easy for me because I love people. I love hearing stories. If I had 2 more hours, I would literally go through all of you and just like, tell me your story. Like tell me where you come from. Like, who are you? What makes you you? Let's see here. Raising 4 teenagers, lots of rope dropping. Yes, girl, I'm not raising them, but I'm working with them. Oof, Lord. That's a really good one. Oh my goodness. And so I ask you all these questions because a lot of times we get that label, right? Like diversity and inclusion. And my coworkers tell me this all the time. For them, it's hard to wrap themselves around it not being just race or just gender or just sexuality or just religion. Like, for them, inclusivity and diversity comes from like the socioeconomic status. Like, we serve a very poor population of our kids, but I tell you what, they are at times the most grateful human beings you'll ever meet. And so that's that inclusivity, right? We used to call ourselves the Island of Misfit Toys because that was how we felt included in our own. But when we started calling ourselves that, so did other schools in our district. And it was like, okay, wait a minute, hang on, we got to back it up. Like, we're the Providence Phoenixes. Everybody says it's Phoeni. I don't really know. I'm not an English major. I don't know all of the appropriate, but we are the Providence Phoenixes. And it's so empowering for our kids to have that identity, right? Because now their perspective lens has been shifted. Pretty much my teenage years in a nutshell. When I was one of the popular kids, being quiet, dressing in dark colors. Ooh, were you a Panic at the Disco kind of gal? Sorry. There are several of those from me with, but took years. Yep, kids comment. I have to drop the rope with my own grandmas. We have very different views on things. And it's hard with family. So I know I'm here talking about diversity and inclusion within helping you all navigate, right? Going into classrooms or going into whatever aspect of education that you're pursuing. That is a fantastic question. Do you think it is possible to unconsciously pick up the rope in the first place? Absolutely. I think that's where, so I know I said I wouldn't do this, and I promise I won't, but that's where that implicit bias comes in. So implicit bias is truly that unconscious, it is very unconscious until you are made aware of it, an unconscious bias that you have towards a group of people, a person, a stereotype, so to speak, based on an experience that you've had, which is stereotypically kind of a traumatic experience. And so do you think it's possible to unconsciously pick up the rope? 110%. Because we're humans and we feel things. And as much as I can sit here and tell you that I love differences, differences also scare me. And so sometimes that unconscious fight or flight, right, kind of kicks in and it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's why we kind of dip our toes in things, right? Like, is anybody here an all in? Are you like 110% all in all the time? Because it's terrifying, right? Like, my adrenaline junkie friends, I'm like, whew, Lord, goodness gracious. Like, for me, it's, you got to get that temp check. You got to kind of feel things out. But I think even if you unconsciously pick up the rope, once you're aware of it, you still have the ability to make the decision to drop it or not. Even if it takes you years. I appreciate you sharing, you said 25 years. I was bullied in high school, my freshman year. So I will share a little bit of my age. I graduated in 2008 from high school. And I got bullied my freshman year by a girl who added me on Facebook like 6 years after that. And I was like, nope, like I couldn't drop the rope. I could not. She picked on me on the bus, like, because the type of bullying I experienced growing up was more, I wasn't Black enough or I wasn't white enough. I was stuck in the middle. And so in the summertime, I blended in one way, but in the wintertime, it was like, and for her, she didn't like me because she didn't like that people liked me, because for her, she was taught to never respect light-skinned women by her own family. I didn't know that. I was a freshman in high school. Like, how am I supposed to know that you don't like me for this, that, or the other? But I didn't know that until 6 years later, when she decided to add me on Facebook. I said no, and she sent me another friend request with a message apologizing. Now, I'm not saying those fairy tales happen everywhere, but sometimes the other person, even if they don't necessarily realize what they're doing to you in the moment, maybe they do 6 years later, and that's when they drop the rope. So then you're able to. So that unconscious piece, like, sometimes can be, sometimes can be very conscious, depending on the tone that's been set in the situation. And I know that just sounded really confusing. I'm sorry. So I'm just going to stop with that drop the rope. Can you hit the next slide? I know I said I wasn't going to talk about. Oh, never mind. All right. Just kidding. So this is the point in a program where I typically go and I wander around with proximity, because I'm a behavior coach and that's what I do. And I would ask you all to bear all of your secrets and be vulnerable and tell me all of your deepest, darkest things. So I've been a little bit vulnerable sharing some of my stories tonight. So my challenge to you all, and I guess my question is, this is rhetorical. What is your passion and purpose with education? At the end of your time with the TEL, can I call it the TEL organization? Sorry, the TEL committee?
You can call us the TEL committee, or the
Okay.
TEL, it's a TEL organization, whatever.
Okay, awesome. I didn't want to, okay. So what
Stands
is
for
it?
Teacher learning. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're good. Teacher, yeah, so teacher, educators.
Educators leading and learning.
I love that.
Educators leading and learning.
No, that's amazing. We have TELs in our district that are called teacher effectiveness leaders. So I just assumed that y'all were effectiveness leaders. And I was like, okay, let's do this.
You are very effective.
So my rhetorical question for you all is, what is your why? Okay, like, I'm not asking what is your life's purpose. What is your why in education? What is your why in wanting to meet people where they're at? What is your why? And this is all rhetorical. You can answer if you want, but when you are handling or when you're pursuing something that's bigger than yourself, which we all are, otherwise we wouldn't be here right now, there's a why. For me, it's, I never want anybody to feel how I've ever felt. That's my passion and purpose. It's, I want to make sure that people who are uncomfortable to have hard conversations feel supported to be able to navigate that. We had a lot of race-based trauma training 2 summers ago, and it was the hardest thing for me because I was the one giving that training to my all-white staff. And it was really hard to be vulnerable with people when you don't see anybody else that looks like you, or you don't have anybody else that understands kind of like the trauma that you've gone through something else, right? And so my why is, I don't care, purple, brown, striped, polka dotted, I don't care who you are, what you look like. I never want anybody to feel how alone I felt. And so I'll be your number one hype man and your greatest champion and cheerleader if you let me. And so that's kind of what drives me to have these conversations. Very casual. I could use really big words. Listen, my kids make fun of me all the time because they say I use ACT words, which I just get really excited and passionate when I talk to them about stuff. But what is your why? Because if you can't figure that out, you're not going to do yourself or anybody else any good when you're immersed in different cultures, or when you're having a conversation with someone at the grocery store that doesn't speak the same language as you. Because a lot of people don't realize there's so much power in that body language, right? A lot of you said the surface level you notice is posture. If I would have came in like this, hey guys, how's it going? You probably would have been like, listen, these professors have lost their minds bringing this woman here. But if I hope that I came in like this, my posture back, I was trying to be attentive, it's a completely different ball game. So what is your why? That is, if there was only one thing that you took from tonight, remember that. What is your why? And drop the rope, because apparently that's a new phrase. I'm gonna have to tell my people that. Brittany says, I can relate. I was bullied big time in elementary and middles. Now I feel like I pour my heart into my students, wanting them to know their value and worth. And it's wild, right? A lot of times, things that have happened to us, there are stuff that I forget about. Okay, I'm 32 years old and I'm like, that happened? Like, are we sure that happened? Because we, you know, our defense mechanism shuts down. So if you think of that, if our defense mechanism shuts down, our students' defense mechanisms are going to shut down because they don't know how to navigate that. They're still young, they're still learning, they're still trying to figure things out. Me too, Brittany, bullied and teased ruthlessly, wanted to teach truly love people and keep them from experiencing what I did. That was my why. I relate as well. I share my stories with students, want them to share with me. We're writing personal narratives. Okay, you're giving me Freedom Writers vibes. I like that. Personal narratives. Great way for me to share my story. The stories that my students have chosen to write are amazing. We do something in our school called a circle it. And I won't lie to you, there are times I feel like I'm in AA, only because, okay, we sit in a circle and it's just, for me, it's very inauthentic. So what's awesome is we kind of get to make our own way that we circle up at our school. So when I was in the classroom, I called them grounding sessions. So they grounded with Gates, but not in like a negative way. And so we sit around in a circle, whether it's on the floor, on chairs, tables. I know that's looked down upon in some places, but I truly believe that if your kids are comfortable in the room, they're willing to open up more. So I'm not one, like typically I'd be walking around. I never sit stationary at work. So this is new for me, but I don't have my standing desk here. So I'm kind of rolling, but it was a really awesome temperature check to be able to like, hey, where are we on a scale of 1 to 10? Are we happy? Are we excited? Are we kind of moody? And stuff like that enables us to have hard conversations. So being able to share things, our staff used to do them. We do them about once or twice a semester now, but kind of that vulnerability piece, that ask a tough question and kind of bare your soul. So that's a strategy. I don't like calling it a resource, if you will, of really awesome ways to kind of open the door to have conversations with friends, with coworkers, with students, faculty alike. Do you all have questions for me about anything? I try to give you a crash course, and I know I went a little fast and I talked a lot, but I hope that something you were able to take away from tonight, because it has been an honor staring at all of your really awesome check boxes and seeing the faces of those that I can see. So
Yes.
Ashley, if they want to know more, what resource would you point them toward?
ooh, so definitely, and I'll type this one in the chat box. So Zarita Hammond is amazing. And if you're more like academic, like you like a little bit more data and stuff, her information is impeccable. So I just typed that in the chat box, Zarita Hammond, CRT in the Brain. For something a little bit more friendly, this one's kind of Tiffany Jewell. A lot of the information and ways that I kind of navigate stuff, Anti-Racist Educator by Tiffany Jewell is super colorful. Like it is not a, oh man, this is going to take me years to read. It is a very colorful, actually meant to bring my book home, but it is at work because I literally use it all day long. It is a very simple little book that's very colorful. And a lot of times I use it with students and I'm like, hey, like, let's pick a page of this and let's kind of talk through it. There's a lot of identity work through it. I think it's more universal because it's not just about race. You can kind of tackle it with different cultural pieces, differentiated, if you will. And then a lot of my information, and when I was in the classroom, let's see here, Teaching for Justice.
Yes. Yes.
I don't know. It used to be Teaching Tolerance, but Teaching for Justice is an insanely amazing website that you can pull resources from, conversation starters, icebreakers, if you will, and videos, articles, podcasts galore. And they're constantly updating things with it, giving you very neutral information about things. I don't feel like it's geared towards, you know, one extreme or the other. It's just providing lots of information and resources. So those are my big three that I use. But that's a good starting point.
Now give me one or two that these students could use with their students. So let's say, let's pick the middle grades, 4, 5, 6, 7. If they want to have these conversations with their students, are there resources you would point them toward?
Definitely. So specifically Teaching for Justice. Otherwise, I have created a lot of conversation starters for our school, for middle school and high school grades. So if anybody would just want to reach out, I know, right? Oh my God, I have to talk to you again. I get it. You all can shoot me an email and I will, it's a Google Drive folder that I have with tons of resources. I would be more than happy to share with that.
The
Thank
Teaching
you,
for Justice. Oh, I'm sorry.
Pardon?
I was going to say the Teaching for Justice is my favorite place. It is really, 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 really great for learning about lots of different information, but it really is like you put it so well. It's not bias or like, it's just very like, here are the facts and here is some information. It's
I
really,
call it universally designed. Like it feels like there's something for everybody there.
there you go. I love that.
Anybody else? Thank you so much for having me. I really, it has been an honor and I thoroughly have appreciated this opportunity. So please don't hesitate if you have questions, comments, or I like a little bit of concerns. Don't hesitate to email me. And again, those resources I have, we have middle school and high school in our school. So I have middle school resources for that reason. But
Well, we thank you so much. This was wonderful. I can't thank you enough for giving your time and just sharing all of these wonderful resources with us. This is so, so important.
thank you. I hope it helps. And I hope, like I said, as long as you took even just a small thing, that's all I'm here for, is just to kind of help. So
I love it.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
thank you
Oh,
all.
Patrick, hi for me.
I will. Oh, I will. We have a meeting at 9 tomorrow. So
Dr. Rhodes says hello.
thank you.
Bye, everybody.